Hi, I'm Johan, and I will talk to you about one graduate student's experience teaching for the first time. I should clarify that I am not the grad student. I am a graduate student, but I am not this graduate student. I have a few goals that I want to get through for this talk. I want to motivate my study of frames. I'll tell you what that is, what I think about when I think of frames. I want to present the study at hand for this one graduate student, and then I want to end with some implications and takeaways for undergraduate mathematics instruction and also for learning. So I have two research questions. The first one is an overarching one. I just wanted to know, what do instructors think about when they're thinking about teaching or learning mathematics? Like, what does that mean for them? So for example, whether or not active learning is implemented in this classroom is sort of uncovered when you ask people, what do you think teaching is about, right? Those kinds of things come up, and so I think it's important for us to ask. And so with that overarching question, and I'll talk about the focus question later after I get frames out of the way, I approached it through the lens of frames. So imagine you walk into a classroom, right? You're faced with having to answer the question, what the heck is going on here? What is it that's going on in this classroom? So that you can proceed appropriately so people understand that you know what you're doing in this classroom. And this comes from Goffman, a sociologist. So frames help individuals process this information by filtering and organizing many of the details in the scenario, like how many students are there, what subject am I teaching, what topic am I teaching today. And so to understand what instructors are thinking about when we ask them about what teaching and learning are about, I'm looking at how they have framed these sort of things. And so, granted, Goffman's sort of explanation of it is a bit nebulous, so I bring in Greeno to give us some structure. So Greeno says that frames provide interpretive context that support participants in a given situation to understand the tasks they're engaged in, what knowledge is important for them to have, and what sort of behaviors they're expected to and others are expected to or entitled to engage in. But to me, this was still kind of broad, and so I worked in the last year to sort of develop a more specific frame of teaching and frame of students learning from the perspective of an instructor. And so I have here 3 things for instructors' sort of frame of learning. What is their role in the classroom? Do they see themselves as a lecturer? Do they see themselves as an advisor? Do they see themselves as a tour guide, for example? What professional knowledge is important to them? Do they need to know the content? Do they need to have some counseling knowledge? All those sort of things. And what types of interactions are favored in the classroom? Do they like students and students to talk to each other? Do they like just them talking and students listen? So what kinds of interactions are important to them? And then on the other side of that, we have the sort of frames of student learning. And this is sort of about what do they have to do for their students to learn the intended content? And then the second part of that, what even is the intended content? What sort of practices and orientations do they really want students to walk away in this classroom? And lastly, again, it's about that interaction. What interactions do they favor for those students to learn the intended content, practice, and orientations? Okay, I'll let it linger here. I don't want to rush too much. But yes. So now I can give you the focus question. How do instructors' frame of teaching and their students' learning compare before and after teaching for the first time? I find this interesting to ask because it gives us a glimpse into the nature of frames, how they might change during a pivotal experience like teaching for the first time. I thought if we're able to understand what informs the shift in frames, maybe we could leverage that in terms of developing professional development opportunities, and maybe we can even shift frames towards more asset-based frames. So now let's get into the study at hand. So this happened at a large Midwestern public university. I'm talking about just one graduate student, Carlos here. He taught intermediate algebra, which is a course that doesn't necessarily satisfy any degree requirements. It's a prereq for another course. He had 23 students divided into table groups, and that table groups will come up later. He had a lot of professional development opportunities. Before the semester started, there was a 3-day teaching orientation. There's a weekly course convener meeting because the course is convened, meaning everybody teaches the same content each day. They have the same sort of assignments, they have the same sort of assessments. And he also attended a pedagogy seminar course offered by the mathematics department. Okay, quickly going over it, I don't want to get into the weeds of how I analyzed it, but weekly observations, I was in the classroom, I was watching what was happening. I was seeing how Carlos was interacting with these students, what interactions he's favoring. I also interviewed him 5 times, one before, 3 during, and another one after the semester ended, just to talk about what teaching and student learning means to him and how that's changing, how he's talking about it throughout the semester. And so after the semester ended, I sat down, I looked at the ways that Carlos talked about teaching, the ways that he talked about learning, and through that, I was able to sort of find a through line of how this shifts. It's not a ginormous shift, but I did notice some things that were changing from here to there. And so I want to talk about it. So before the semester, Carlos started teaching intermediate algebra was just giving flavor, giving a taste for each little thing in algebra that will prepare students for the next class. He saw his role in the classroom as just getting students to buy into mathematics, which he can accomplish if he just gets everybody involved. He really highlighted having good communication skills, being able to say when he's wrong or when he doesn't know something, and being able to adapt in the process. He really wanted to build a good relationship with students and in between students. Now, after the semester, he sort of thought about mathematics as playing a role in the mathematical development of the students and their learning process and acquiring problem-solving skills. Now, I forgot to mention, here this is just based on one interview. I didn't have much data to work with, but I'm able to sort of have a more thorough look at his way of framing teaching, because now there's like 4 other interviews building up to this. He saw his role as more of an advisor or a lecturer, and I'll talk about why that sort of shifted. He wanted to foster an egalitarian classroom, as he said, where everybody is equal, working together. Knowledge to him was more so content and pedagogical content, to have the foresight to know where students will struggle. He felt a bit insecure because students kept thinking that he was unprepared for class. And interactions, he really values student-to-student interactions because he didn't have a chance to visit each table group, but he tries his best each and every day to visit all the 6 different tables in his classroom. Now let's take a step back. He started off thinking students learn by just actively doing just problems by themselves, and then working with other classmates. He said this really nice quote, which is why I'm choosing to use him for this discussion. He says he really wants good classmates as well as being good students. He wants students to be good classmates with each other, as well as being good students to him. The problems become more challenging, as he expected, and it's expected that students productively struggle before they come to him. That's sort of how he thought about learning. Students will struggle first, they'll work together, and then they'll come to me. But then after the semester, student learning is more student-led. It's the student classroom. He gave up control. He's just like, they decide what happens. If they want me to lecture more, I'll lecture more. If they want more time for homework problems, they'll do homework problems. He emphasized connections between topics, always referring back to older topics whenever they enter new ones. And most importantly, these ideas of being a good classmate and also persevering through productive struggle was still true throughout the semester. Okay, I just talked to you about the different ways that his frames have shifted. I want to highlight the sort of experiences that I think is what informed those sort of shifts. So towards knowledge, I wanted to highlight the sort of idea that he didn't realize that students would struggle as much as they did. So he was thinking, oh, I just have to give them a taste of each flavor, a taste of each topic. And it was surprising for him that his students needed a lot more than just a taste. They needed more of a help in terms of knowing the pitfalls. So now, in the end of the semester, he was talking about how he wants to highlight where pitfalls happen. How do I help students through those pitfalls? It's not just knowing the content, but also the pedagogical content to help students through that sort of struggle. And then towards practice and orientation, he stayed consistent. This is the one thing that I think stayed true throughout the semester. He really believed in productive struggle. He really believed that students will learn through this productive struggle. And he still highlights throughout the semester, you should be good classmates to each other as well as good students to me. And I want to connect that to his roles in interaction. I think this was the thing where we really sat down and had a good conversation. He said, I wasn't able to successfully reach the students as I liked. And I was also not able to build a good personal relationship with the students. In particular, we were talking about a specific table group in his 6 table groups, where it's just female students all in one table. And he noticed that they wouldn't ask questions. Not that they didn't have questions, but they just didn't want to ask him. And they always opted to pressure one student specifically to be the one to ask in their favor or in their stead. So Carlos noticed this, and we had a conversation, and he said that he thought students should at least talk to each other, even if it's not with him. And so he really leaned on to this idea of an egalitarian classroom. This is why he gave up control of his classroom. He wanted students to dictate what happened in the classroom, because he found out that students don't really gravitate to him as he expected. And so conclusions and implications, Carlos put a lot of value in being a good classmate. It's why I chose him for this discussion. I think it's the first time that I've heard somebody say good classmate as opposed to good student, because he came from a culture where learning happens together. Him and his peers working together, to him, was a very integral step into why he becomes a mathematician, why he works really hard in being a good teacher. The context of college teaching also materialized in the way that Carlos believed that students should choose the way that they learn, because this is when they become adults. He didn't say this, but he basically said he doesn't want to baby them. It's not his place to tell them how to learn. It is their choice whether or not they want to learn in this way. This reaffirmed the idea that new college instructors leverage their past experiences as students to inform how they think students will learn math. So a lot of his pre-semester thoughts were informed of, I did this as a student, I saw this as a student, and all that stuff. As for his teaching, Carlos's behaviors and norms aligned with the department's culture and expectation of active learning, centering group work in the pre-calculus courses. So to him, it made sense. You should do active learning, we should actively learn together, we should talk to each other. That he didn't really think about other methods of working or learning. And lastly, this concept of striving for a culture of good classmate on top of being a good student, I think is a nice takeaway for undergrad education. I think after this interview, because this happened in the fall, or in last year, I've implemented this sort of idea in my own classroom. It's you should really be good to each other. You're gonna be working together. And I think it's just something to highlight. If there's one thing that you should walk away here as an instructor, as maybe an educator, is to just ask students to be good classmates on top of being good students. And then lastly, more sort of concretely, I think better shaping professional development for graduate student instructors, or even just new instructors that you're hiring, has consequently better shaped the learning experiences of undergrads. And I think most importantly here, something that I didn't really have time to highlight is graduate student instructors, GSIs, don't really have the freedom to critically change instruction on the fly. They're already pressured into I have to do X, Y, and Z. So they don't have the freedom to think, oh, I should probably do this more equitably, or examine what actions they're doing in the classroom that inform sort of what they want to do more equitably. Okay, sorry for marathoning that, but thank you for listening. Special thanks for everybody for joining me here today. If you have any questions or inquiries, my email is right there. I've also uploaded the slides, so if you want to read through them again, it's already on the homepage. But yeah, thank you.